welcome Rhyan Cassady to Dragon Talk. Welcome!
Yay, Ryan! I'm your
Welcome to the
biggest
party.
fan. Oh, your biggest fan is here in our studio audience. His name is Puppy.
So you are a longtime D&D player. How long have you been playing? When was your origin story? How did you start?
Yeah, so I started playing D&D, like really getting into it, probably a couple months after I graduated college back in 2011. I had...
Sorry. I was like literally being like, oh, he's going to say like 1992 or something like that.
Oh,
No.
he wasn't born. Oh, my God.
2011.
86 was my birth year.
Okay. All right.
But I had a little taste of it when I was in high school, probably I'd say 2003, 2004. I had a friend in high school. His brother was big into D&D. He was a really good artist, and he had all the player's handbook, the DM guide. I believe it was 3.5 at the time. And, you know, him and his buddies were playing for a little bit, and I kind of was over randomly, and I saw them. And I was like, what are you guys doing? Are you guys like acting? What's going on? There's dice involved, you know? And I kind of watched them for a little bit, and it looked pretty fun. And they were able to get me in for a session, and I was really intrigued, but I didn't have any friends to play with me at the time. So it kind of died down a bit. But then once college hit, you know, I had some buddies who were just as nerdy as me, talk about D&D a little bit. And I was like, hey, let's give it a shot. So in 2011, we started a campaign, and no one really knew how to DM at the time. So I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot, whatever.
How hard can it be?
Yeah, I was like, how hard could it be? And I started noticing all the rules and all the books. And I was like, okay, I might be a little too much over my head right now. But I had another buddy who kind of helped me out a little bit. So it wasn't too bad. And that my first campaign DMing was actually an amazing time. We still actually play that campaign.
Oh, no way.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's kind of died down a bit. We don't play as much due to COVID and stuff. But it's been a great time with D&D. It's a major part of my life. I've made so many friends because of D&D, and you know, I'll always rep D&D whenever I can. I love it.
Nice.
Oh, that's nice.
And
Yeah. So when you said that, so you took on the role of Dungeon Master, and so what did you like? How did you even jump into that role? Did you just pick up a DMG and say, "Oh God, I've made a terrible mistake"?
At first I was, and again, I had a buddy. He actually jumped into the campaign as a player, and he had all the books, and he allowed me to borrow some of those books. And I was going through, and I was like, man, this is so much information. And my friend Jacob at the time, I mean, he's still my friend, but he kind of just explained some of the basic concepts. And you know what? I had the book with me every time we played, and I kind of just went along with it. You know, I didn't remember all the rules, but that's kind of the fun of D&D. You don't have to follow the book, you know, word for word. You can make up rules on the spot. I always try to be, you know, consistent about it and fair. But once I realized that my players were totally cool with the way I DM'd, I started to feel a lot more comfortable. And I wasn't always worrying or being stressed about, you know, oh crap, what's the rule for this? You know, I kind of just made up on the spot if I didn't know. Or if the players wanted to look onto their phones or something, they'd pull out a book or something. So it wasn't too much of a hassle for me. And over the years, I've just gotten much more comfortable with it. And thank you to Wizards of the Coast for pulling out 5th edition, because I love 5th edition so much. So
nice. Yeah. So yeah, you started with 3.5, and it's when you started doing DMing, you were in the 4th edition era with the Eberron setting. Is that right?
Yes. And that's actually the campaign setting that I started with, was Eberron, and I love Eberron. It's what started everything for me, and to this day, I rep Eberron as much as possible.
Nice. What is it about?
So that was me. I started with 3.5 in Eberron as well.
Really?
Nice. Yep. Awesome.
Yep.
What was it about it, Ryan, that you know, played into your sensibilities?
You know, I'd have to say it was mainly because it was my first campaign setting that I kind of played with.
Remember your first?
Yeah, it was my first, and I really liked some of the additional races and classes that they had included in Eberron, like the Warforged.
Yeah.
It's a favorite of mine. I can't go wrong with the Warforged, at least in my books. And just the whole aspect of how magic and technology works in Eberron is really what got me. It hooked me. Like the class of the Artificer, infusing magic into items. That was really cool. Like, I mean, I know you could probably do that with, any campaign setting, but it was right there for me to go off of in Eberron, and to this day, love it.
Yeah, that is cool because you're right. You could certainly come up with some of the things that are going on in Eberron and infuse them into your homebrew campaign. But here it was, the entire, setting as it was described included all of those things, and so it's always just easier to jump into all of that. And you're right, the Warforged are something. There's something about it that just feels weird and strange, not like other things in Dungeons and Dragons, right? So it's got all those qualities. For
sure, definitely. And then another race I really fell in love with was the Shifter. My buddy plays a monk shifter. It's pretty crazy. It's fun what he does with it. A bear monk shifter.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird to like imagine, but he just runs around pretending to be like Macho Man Randy Savage. It's hilarious.
Snap into an iron ration.
That's awesome.
Exactly. That's exactly the voice.
That's so great. So now you're, you have a podcast that is a actual play podcast, Taverns and Caverns. Talk a little bit about how that started.
Yeah. So, Taverns and Caverns kind of just started off the cuff. It was kind of like a random thing. I had a couple of friends who have never played D&D, and they wanted to try playing it. And at the time, I started to get into some podcasts, and I was like, you know what? Let's try doing a podcast randomly just for fun. I had no experience with podcasting as far as setting up anything, so I apologize if early episodes have some pretty poor audio, but
I feel like that's true of every podcast, including this one.
That is true. Yes, we have.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Check out some of those early Dragon Talks, and you can hear toilets flushing in the background.
Right, exactly.
People walking to meetings. Yeah.
Yeah. But it all started with, again, a bunch of buddies and friends. My girlfriend as well had never really played D&D all too much before, and she wanted to try it. And my other friends, Brianna and Julian, have never played it. So I was like, you know what? I'll whip up something really quick for you guys and see if you guys like it. And we kind of did like a test run session where they created some characters, and they really enjoyed it. So I was like, you know what? If you guys really enjoyed it and you want to keep playing, what do you guys think about doing a podcast? Just first time for everyone. So, and they were all pumped. They're like, yeah, let's do it. So I was like, all right, cool. Let's give it a try. And the only other player in the podcast is my friend Robert, and he's actually in my other campaign that I started back in 2011. So him and I were probably we're the only two players that were, experienced with D&D. Julian, Bri, and Felicia, they had no experience whatsoever. That's so cool. It was a nice introduction for D&D for them. But we started, and they had a blast, and we decided to start recording, and we let it out. And I heard through some other friends that they've always wanted to try D&D. So I was like, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity for people who have never played D&D, have always been interested, to kind of listen in a little bit, to kind of see, well, how do my friends play it?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can be very intimidating for some people to jump into D&D. So it was a great way for other friends to kind of take a peek, listen, see how we played things. And it's funny because I have a lot of friends that listen to it now, and all of them are now either playing D&D or wanting to play D&D. It's a really fun thing in my life, and I'm glad that I'm able to do it. I also run some demo sessions online from time to time with people who have never played. I throw really quick one shots for them to do, whether they want to create a character or I create a character for them, and they can kind of test out the battle versus the role play, whatever floats their boat. So that's cool. Kind of really, that's how, well, thank you. Yeah, it's fun. I've had a couple people who have never played do the demo sessions, and they've been asking me, I want to play some more. Unfortunately, I don't have like all the time to play 50 campaigns, but
if only you had a time warp spell you could cast that could allow you to play all
exactly.
So going back to what you said about the demo, so you said people can test out the role play or test out, like, what do you mean by that?
So thankfully with online resources, we have like things like Roll20 where you can play, RPGs online. So I'll set up quick little one-shot campaigns on Roll20, and then I'll basically talk to a number of people that are interested, and I'll tell them, hey, do you want me to help you create a character, go through that process? Or do you want me to make something or a character for you based off what you like? Ooh, and I'll have that ready for you.
That could be a nice little side hustle, I feel like.
Right.
People would like that. Yeah, here's some of the things I like doing. Here's some of the things I'm into. It's kind of like a Stitch Fix for character creation. You guys probably don't know what that is.
Or it's like a cosmopolitan personality quiz.
Kind of, but you can check off the things that you like, and then somebody curates a character.
Yeah, that's exactly what I ended up doing.
Concierge service.
I have my friend Vince. His wife found out that he was listening to the podcast, and she has no experience with D&D whatsoever. And she found out I was doing some demos, and she was like, Vince, can you ask Ryan if I can play in the demo? I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, come on in. You're more than welcome. You and your husband are welcome to join. And she had no idea what was going on. So I was like, you know what? Well, what kind of character do you like? Here are the races you can choose from, some of the classes and stuff. And she kind of went over some of that. And they ended up buying the player's handbook to go over this stuff, and ended up reading most of it in a week. So it was crazy.
Wow.
But she basically said, I can't choose if I want a ranger or if I want a rogue that goes into arcane trickster. And I was like, whatever you feel best suits your character, I'll make it for you. Just tell me what race, what are your quirks, what kind of items do you want to have, weapons, armor, what fits your play style and your imagination, and I'll do my best to create it, and then you can be that character in the demo. So once I create these characters, or the players create their characters for the demo, I'll run I try to keep it minimal to 2 hours at tops for the demo. It's a very quick, you're in the tavern or in a cavern or whatever, and something goes down. I give the players time to kind of introduce each other and meet one another, and that gives them that slight role play kind of feel for the first couple of minutes or so. And then I'll, do a quick battle, a very simple battle, so they can get a test or a taste of battle and role play at the same time. And I kind of explain to them a full campaign. It can go months, years, depending on what you guys are wanting to do. But that's basically how the demo sessions work. They get to test out D&D, see if they like it. And I'm always lenient as far as what people want to do. I always want to make sure the players are having fun. So when it comes to D&D and my players ask me questions, I'm usually a yes man. So as long as they're having fun, that's all that matters to me. Because when they're having fun, I'm having a blast. So
great way to think about dungeon mastering, especially with new players, right? I think a lot of people lose that because they'll be like, well, I got to make sure that I make it hard or challenging for them. And I'm like, actually, you don't.
Right. And that's something you can always talk about too, prior to forming a group for D&D, kind of get a feel for what your players want and what you want as a DM. Talk about that. If certain players want to play the game where it's like, I want to do nothing but battles, I want to maximize my damage, and that's okay. But make sure that's known beforehand, and you can play that way. Or if there's other people that care about the role playing aspect more, I'm someone that likes to get in between. So
yeah. I feel like I'm in between as well. But I'm kind of intrigued by this idea of giving people a short little taste of role play and combat, kind of the two main things that you're probably going to experience in your game, because they're both overwhelming or can be perceived as overwhelming to a new player. Sure. But if you're just okay, this is how combat, I'm going to say this and you are going to do this. Just really roll the largest die you have, the one with 20 sides, and add it to this, it kind of breaks it down. And then,
it does.
And then just gently, here's a pretty basic tavern scene. just introduce yourselves. Hey, look, guys, you're role playing. Because I keep going back to the game that we played with Lauren and Ricky when they were brand new, and even just like the idea of role play is very scary. Like people don't realize it's really just talking, and you can just talk in your regular voice.
Right.
It doesn't like you don't like people have a connotation with role play that's like, oh my God, like I need a costume and I need a voice and I have to be very, very clever and creative.
And this isn't a sex thing, is it?
Right. Like, are we in therapy? Like what? What's happening here?
So all those preconceived notions about you can like tear them down just by being like, hey, look, we just did role play. It was great.
Yeah, you guys were like, that's it. I'm just talk to each other.
You can be very simple about it. It doesn't have to be anything, crazy. And one of the things I like to do with the players in the demo sessions, I always provide them like quick little like 1-page cheat sheets to kind of show them what they can do like in combat and stuff like that. So if they ever like forget, they're always welcome to ask me during the demo. I always tell the players like, hey, everyone here is new. No one's played. Ask questions. Right. We can hold the game. I'll answer any questions you guys have. So a lot of it is me kind of explaining the rules one at a time, making sure it's easy to understand, not too intimidating for them. So, and for sure in the role-playing aspect, that's the fun part about DMing for me is when you start a session with a bunch of new people, my 2011 campaign, for example, all of us, except for one, was brand new to D&D. I didn't know what to expect. I was the Dungeon Master. I didn't do random voices for NPCs and things like that at first. I just used my normal voice. Everyone around the table used their normal voice. But as we continued to play, I was like, you know what, let me try and spice it up a bit. Throw a deep voice in here, a light voice in there. And it started to pick up. And then the best part about D&D as a DM is your players. Once they grow comfortable with their character, they might start coming up with new voices. And, once someone is like attuned to their character and they have that voice down, and they really get into the role-playing aspect, and I can just sit back and watch them role-play. That is the best feeling as a DM.
I agree with you. When you can have a session where you're like, hey, I didn't really talk very much at all. It was all about the interplay between the characters as they try to resolve the drama amongst themselves that they created, right? Yes. And you're like, oh gosh.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. It's a little bit hard for some players because some enjoy just the combat aspect, right? And they just come into it just as a strategy game, and that can be really fun. But I really love the subtle hints, and it sounds like you were doing these too, maybe not even purposely, of just asking like, okay, so what did you said what you want your character to say, but like, how do they actually word it? Like, don't just tell me the 20,000 foot view of this conversation. Like, tell me what they actually say. And you can see them like work through that a little bit and be like, I'm going to say this. And then you're right. After time, inflections change and, some characterization changes because you're forcing the player to think not as a player, but as a character.
Right. Exactly. And, that just comes with time. And that's something I tell, plenty of new players, don't feel like you have to have your character down packed right away.
Yeah.
Your character grows with you. So, as time goes, you'll become more, attuned and comfortable playing that character. So,
and what's interesting, and this is just totally a random aside, but I remember I didn't watch this show. It was called The Blacklist. James Spader was in it. Did you ever see that show? You know what I'm talking about?
I did not.
I didn't really watch it either, but I happened to watch one interview that he did on like a late night talk show. And he was very forthcoming about saying like, here, I'm doing these interviews. It was right when Jimmy Fallon was starting the Tonight Show thing. And so it was under the guise of James Spader giving Jimmy Fallon a compliment. He was trying to say like, it's so great to be able to talk to you because you're so happy and fun and blah, blah, blah. And here I am, and we don't really know what the show is about yet. Like, we're still making the Blacklist. We just did the pilot. We did like 3 or 4 episodes. We're still making it up. And I don't really even know how to talk about my character because we're still doing it. Like, we're still in this, early stages of setting the tone for it. And for some reason, that little detail of an actor admitting that on a national stage that he doesn't know what the heck he's doing and they're improvising and making the show together with the collaborators, with the writers, with the producers, with the other actors. I'm like, that's a D&D campaign.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. No one's perfect. I mean,
Yeah.
you roll with the punches, you go with, what's on the table, and you do your best. I mean, you can't ask for any more than that.
So what's
that's interesting to think about, like your first, the first time you have your campaign started. Why can I not think of like the first day, what
session?
Thank you. There's the word. Thinking of it as like a pilot, as a like that's an interesting way of like how to frame. Anyway, just something to think about.
It's a good way to think about it, because you go into it, not expecting, to do everything. There's going to be hiccups along the way. I mean,
new characters, getting to know the characters, getting to know the world. Do you go into your campaigns like well, how do you prepare for a campaign? Do you know, because it's a homebrew that you?
Yes. Yeah. So with Taverns and Caverns on our podcast, it's all homebrew based, and it's funny because it's more along the lines of, I'm probably not the best DM to follow with how I do things, but I'll start setting a few things up, and at least with the podcast, it's kind of a tell your what do you call it? A choose your own adventure book kind of thing. I'll provide them with. Yes, exactly. There you go. I'll provide them with several options, and they kind of just choose which option they do. And sometimes, well, more than sometimes, they're really good about choosing like option Z when I only have option A and B.
That's my biggest fear.
But we kind of just play, and we create the world as we go. So it's not only on me to create the world. We call it Reverie. The players also create it as well. So during role playing, for example, Brianna's character, she plays a rogue. His name is Damien, and she might say something during role play like, my family back in this town, and I'll keep a note. I'll be like, okay, well, that's a town that exists in this world. So we kind of make it up as we go. I do a lot of prepping in terms of, I try to make sure like the world's physics and like the Patreons, or patrons, but the gods and goddesses all kind of, are consistent. I try not to just throw random things every time we play, but we do build upon the world as we play, which is nice because that means no one has to worry about, well, should I study this campaign setting? Should I know what this nation is? Should I know where these, particular group of people come from? We kind of don't worry about that. So
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how do you keep track of all of that?
So I personally, I like to write, and I have a Google Doc where I kind of write my sessions in a format of like a chapter. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I'll just say, session 1, for example, and I'll start coming up with ideas of what I can do, what might happen, potential villain, and I'll write out quick chapter. And then once I have that chapter written, we'll play it, and if they follow it, they follow it. If they don't, they don't. I'll come up with something else if need be. But
do you share that with your players, or do you keep that just for you?
I keep that for myself. I try not to spoil too much for them. I want it to be exciting, and I don't want them to see what's going to happen in the future. But when it comes to the writing aspect, I like to throw in like an overarching story that they can focus on, but that's not the only story they have to focus on. There's a lot of side quests that they'll go and do that they choose to do, and that's perfectly fine. I'll let them go and do that, but I like to provide them at least a main antagonist or an event or something that will keep them going forward. Whereas, one of the things we do in the podcast, there's a thing called the Adventurers Guild that I just threw in there, and it's basically players go into the Adventurers Guild and they sign up to be a guild member, and there's random quests they can take. And I'll just go into the monster manual prior to the session. I'll be like, all right, let's look at some monsters that would fit their level. All right, well, here's some goblins, for example. There's a group of goblins causing problems over here, and I'll look. Oh, there's some zombies doing this over here. So they'll go and choose kind of like what quest they want to take. And depending on where they go, it just goes from there.
Yeah.
So it gives them that feeling of, we get to choose our adventure. We get to choose what we're doing. We're not only focusing on this one event or this one antagonist, because overall every character has their own story. They're not always going to be together and say let's just do this one thing all the time. There's things they can do here and there on the side as well. So
that's cool. Tell me about Reverie. Like just even the name of that has a little bit of a allure to me. So yeah, what makes it interesting?
So Reverie actually first started. I actually created I'm a game designer for a board game. It's called Untold Reverie, and the whole meaning behind Reverie, it's like a daydream, something that's a fantasy. It doesn't exist. You're dreaming about something. That word, it just came to me when I created this board game called Untold Reverie, and in my board game, it's actually not the same world that I use in the board game for the podcast. I just liked the name Reverie, but
it's a cool word.
Good.
Yeah, and the way of, I think what makes Reverie interesting in terms of the podcast is, for me personally, if you're the DM, you have to have fun with the creation of the world or what's going on in this world, whether you're using a campaign setting like Eberron or if you're Forgotten Realms or whatever. For me, I personally like to create things. It's what speaks to me as a DM. I just like to be able to create and see how the players react to it. And when it comes to creating Reverie, I don't know if you guys can see, I'm kind of crazy about like going into things, but this here is a map that I created.
I was going to ask about that. Actually.
Yes,
nice.
It's actually the main continent in the called Tirister. And I'll go into things like this and I'll create crazy stuff, and I'm like, hey guys, this is kind of the world or the continent you're on. You can go here, whatever you guys want to do. Have fun with it. But I think what makes Reverie exciting and fun to listen to is it's the whole players or listeners, I guess, they don't know what to expect. Reverie is a whole new thing. We make it up as we go. Some people may not like that, but for us, it's something we love to do. And, some players or listeners, they like to listen to stuff that's being made up on the spot, because if you can see that this group of people are making something up as they go, why can't we do it? It's the whole homebrew aspect I love, because everyone is able to be creative. And I think that's why, at least for Reverie, in the world of Reverie, it's something that everyone has pitched in on. It's, I know I created the map and stuff, but as far as some of the stories and the wonderful characters, the players created that. And that whole homebrew aspect, everyone feels like they have a connection to the campaign. And I think that's what makes Reverie or any other homebrew meaningful to people.
Well, not all homebrews are like that. I mean, that's a very distinct thing. I mean, I do know people who do that, but there are the ones who, as Dungeon Master, control all of the details and only allow that to happen. So that's not necessarily all about homebrew. But if you could summarize, like, is Reverie based on medieval times? Does it have like that kind of idea of warring nations? What's kind of the basic things that the players have created?
Yeah, so at least on my end as the Dungeon Master in creating Reverie, I have a lot of inspiration from my first campaign setting.
From Eberron.
Yes, so there's a bunch of inspiration that comes from Eberron. I guess Reverie would be very close to Eberron in terms of the fantasy feel. It's like the medieval fantasy mixed with, flying airships with technology that is, with magic. And, and that's something people always forget too when they're playing D&D. You're allowed to take inspiration from other things, You don't always have to create something brand new every time. But in the world of Reverie, growing up as a kid, I was in love with old RPG games like Final Fantasy, things like that. And that was a big inspiration too. I loved the flying airships. And when I found out, wow, Eberron has these awesome flying airships too, that was like, I got to do it. Got to have it. So
cool.
Yeah.
Are there specific players that have taken on, countries or nations and kind of developed them?
So far we're still pretty new podcast. The story, we try to do like 2 episodes a month. We're pretty busy. We don't get to play as often as we would want.
Yeah.
But most of the focus for the main players is one nation at this point called Lande, and most of their story is taking place there. I have left open the rest of the continent of Tyrrister for these episodes that we do called side stories.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times on the side stories, I do my best to try and pull in other players that haven't played D&D before and they want to try it. But for the side story episodes, we try to do things and try to do stories that are like one shots that take place in different parts of Tyrrister. So it's for the listeners, it's not always the same place.
Right.
They can hear, well, there's these characters doing this in this nation, these characters doing this in that nation. And one of the fun side stories that I recently had done was I had a local friend that is a local author. He joined in on this side story, and I had another buddy who had never played D&D before. And he said, "Hi, I listened to your podcast. Can I try?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. You want to be on the podcast?" It was his very first time playing. And I was like, "You can be in the world of Reverie. I mean, you love listening to the podcast. Come make a character in the world of Reverie and we'll do something."
Nice.
So, with that side story, we did something in a completely different part of the map. And when it comes to that, there's not necessarily any warring nations per se, but that's something that if the players want to do something like that, by all means, we can make it happen.
Start a war.
We can start a war. I mean, that's what you all want. Obviously, as I created Reverie, I have notes of each nation's like agendas and kind of like what they look forward to. So like if starting a war is something you guys want to do, I have the perfect nation that's ready to do that. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess do the characters have that information?
Yes and no. If they ask for it, role-playing wise, I'll tell them. If they ask for it out of character, I'll tell them.
Okay. They just have to ask for it. Because that would be, I could see like coming from one of these different nations, how that would inform the character maybe that you're building.
Right. And I try to open that up too with role-playing as NPCs as well. I'll try to talk about other things that's happening when I can as an NPC to kind of do that in character to see if they catch on. That's one of the fun things I like to do here and there, see if they catch on to something.
That is the best when you can drop a hint in the middle of a conversation and be like, will they? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. So now there's a board game too?
Yeah, so the board game's completely separate from the podcast or anything. I actually was very bored one day.
No pun intended.
Back in 2017, I was like, you know what? I don't see very many tabletop games, that do like the strategy RPG type gameplay that I like that D&D kind of has. So, one day I just started writing up some stuff and I was like, let's make a home board game just for fun. And at that point, I just started really getting into it. I took some inspiration from old tactical role-playing games, like Fire Emblem was an older game that I played as a kid. I love that strategy concept. And then I looked at D&D. I was like, D&D is basically similar to, some of these old tactical RPGs that I played as a kid, So I kind of like tried to mix some of those aspects from each game to try and create something new and quick for a board game. And it kind of went crazy. I had some people play test it and they really had a lot of fun. I actually have it here with me.
Nice.
So it's not actually like official for sale or anything. I'm still in the work of play testing, doing things. I've taken the game to several events, conventions. Origins is actually one of the ones I really want to take it to. But there is an RPG convention called ArcadeCon in Dayton. I was able to take and do a play test and get some people's opinions on the game. And then I've taken to a couple other local Ohio conventions for play testing. And at some point I was like, you know what? People are really liking this idea and this board game. So I was like, let's try to make a a version just for, I guess, myself that I could just have and show people for fun. Because it's not something, your friends or random people just do. I don't know. Maybe they do. I don't know. But so I
Feels
actually
like everybody here in Seattle is a board game designer on the side. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. But I got really crazy into it, and I had some friends that were artists, and I was like, hey, if I pay you guys, would you guys make some characters up for me for the board game? And then my friend Alexis was a graphic designer. I was like, Alexis, if I give you, all my notes for the rules and I make sure it's, easy to read, can you create a whole manual for it? And she was able to do it.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know if you guys can see, but I actually got it all printed.
Oh my God.
It's an actual board game.
What?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
I was saying you were just making a prototype and cutting out pieces and stuff on cardboard.
Not what I expected.
That's what it was for a while.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's make something nicer for people when we go to these conventions to play test. So it has the whole manual for people to look through.
Oh my God.
All the pieces and everything. But a lot of the inspiration for this, again, comes from the tactical role-playing games from
Final Fantasy Tactics. Did you play that one?
Yes, that's actually what started me on the whole tactical RPG thing.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy Tactics, and then as a kid I also played Super Mario RPG.
Right.
That's what got me into RPGs. And then I saw Final Fantasy Tactics, and to this day, Final Fantasy Tactics is still my favorite tactical role playing game.
Me too.
And that's probably part of the reason why I love D&D is because I saw the grids, and I'm like, it plays like Final Fantasy Tactics, except I get to control the character.
Yeah.
But
so how does it work? Is it a co-op game or is it competitive?
So the board game, it's mostly competitive. You can do 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, or free for all. We're actually doing some more play testing. I wanted to change some of the rules up, but COVID happened, and I haven't been able to do a lot of play testing for it because of that. So hopefully, once COVID kind of calms down, I can get some more events going on with it. But it's mostly competitive. So basically, you choose a faction. And once you choose a faction, each faction has what's called commanders or heroes. You choose one hero or commander, and then you choose 5 or how many you want out of so many soldiers that are different classes. And it's basically like a mix of chess meets D&D kind of. You have a commander who has special skills, who's a little stronger than your normal units. And then you have your normal units that all have different skills as well.
Mm-hmm.
You take it to a board. It's an 8x8 board called your territory. And each player has their own board. And you basically place the boards together and it creates a giant map. And there's D6s involved and some D4s, but that's about it. And each card is like a character that has stats and things like that. A game that's somewhat similar to it, if you guys have ever played the tabletop game, it's I think it's called Super Dungeon Explorer, something like that. It's similar to that, not as much of a dungeon crawler, but more of like an army.
Yeah,
it's an army kind of thing.
Yeah, sounds similar to Dungeon Command that was done for Wizards when it was the skirmish game with the miniatures, which I loved.
Similar to that.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's awesome. What a great, creative, fun project to do when we're all in
when
our
you
houses.
get bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Sometimes I go a little too crazy with it sometimes, but yeah.
Shelly, when you get bored, what do you do? Do you make board games?
Like when I get bored, I usually just watch some Netflix. Or read
I
a
do
book.
that too.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
I don't really make a board game, but I do make bread. I do make bread now. That counts. Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, cooking counts. Baking, cooking. I love cooking. I do it all the time.
Do you ever cook, do you ever theme your meals with your game or create a tasting menu to go with that night's adventure?
I have never done that, but that's a great idea.
Yeah. We're talking a little bit today with somebody about doing that, pairing food and with wherever your players might be exploring in the world, give them a little taste of the cuisine.
Yeah, and you could also put some background music.
Yeah,
kind of set the tone and the mood. There you go.
Put on some Sirenscape, you're good to go.
Yeah, dim the lights, put on the Sirenscape.
Right.
As long as there's some thematic brew involved, I think it'll be a really fun time.
Yep, definitely.
Nice. So I really like the idea, just going back to, your Dungeons and Dragons stuff, how you have been inviting folks around the neighborhood in Columbus to come in and do these one shots. That's going to be a great way to bring in more audience, especially if they have their own streaming audience.
For sure, and that's, I think that's another reason I really enjoy DMing for people. It's getting people to join the community, showing people that D&D is not as intimidating as it can be. People having fun, having a great time. That's what I like to see.
Yeah. So I mean, you're doing so many great things about trying to expand the audience on your own.
Yes,
I have to say thank you, but
no problem. I have a blast doing it. I some of the side projects I currently have, I'm trying to do a lot of collaboration with some local artists and people that have skills that I unfortunately do not have. I like, for example, again, I mentioned my friend. He's an author, local author, Charles Askew. I'm actually collaborating with him to do what's called some short stories or narratives, where he's writing up short stories for NPCs that we've created along the way. What? And I'm kind of allowing him to do that on his own. And he gives me the synopsis. And I kind of go over it with him. And we're trying to add that to the podcast as content. So for people that like to read and things like that, they'll have an author who has written short stories of NPCs or characters that listeners enjoy. And then I'm also doing collaboration with, I have a friend, he's a local artist. His name's Stephen Watley. He does amazing artwork, and he does a lot of the artwork for the podcast. We do like cover art for each episode that we try to post on Instagram and stuff to kind of create that visual for the world, so people can kind of see what we're imagining as we go. And but yeah, other than that, it's one of those things we try to expand on. So
I like that.
So but who does all the maps? Because your website, they're just free for people just to.
Oh, so I was gonna say, I created most of the maps on our website. You can just find them on tavernscaverns.com. Battle maps people can use on Roll20 or whatever online source that they use. But there's actually a wonderful resource if you're into creating maps, or you've always wondered, well, we're playing online because of COVID or whatever, and I don't have a map for this particular session or area. There's an awesome resource called Incarnate. It's just Google Incarnate. You can create your own D&D maps or whatever based off of their resource. And you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be skilled. I'm not an artist. I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to that stuff. But they have an online resource tool that you can actually use to create your own maps. And you can either do like the free version, which has like the limited stuff, or you can do like the paid version, which has a lot more brushes and backgrounds and things like that. So one of the things I always hear people say at least my friends playing online is, we don't have a lot of maps to choose from, or people don't like to Google, random maps. They want to have their own maps, so that's a great way for people to create their own maps. And I know on our website, I was like, you know what? I'm having fun with the podcast. Let's make some simple battle maps people can use, whatever's for free. Just have fun, guys. Like, have at it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've used Incarnate in my homebrew campaign. It's been a great resource.
Nice.
Not so much for the battle maps. I haven't done that because I've been focused on creating kind of miniature scapes on the table behind me. But for region maps and city maps, it's really great to have some control over there, and it's all saved online, and so you can share it really easily. And I'm not an artist at all, but I like making maps, and it's been that idea of not having the skill to draw a tree, but I can use all these different trees.
Yeah, exactly. And it's easy to use. It's fun. It's easy. You could be as creative as you want with it.
Yeah.
What is it called?
Incarnate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like a fun activity to do with Quinn.
Oh yeah, you can. Like I say, they have the free version, so you can test it out and see if it's something you're into. And by all means, be as creative as you want. It's fun to use. So.
Yeah, and it's a great tool about getting that spark of creativity around dungeon mastering that a lot of people feel as a blocker, where they'll be like, well, I'm just not good at drawing, so I guess I can't be a dungeon master, and I'm like, well, I mean, there's all these things that you can use. You just gotta, figure out where they are, and some people just don't understand them. But I wanted to ask you, since you've been doing such a great job of getting new players into the game with these demo sessions that you've been doing, I wonder if there's a way to adapt to that idea, or if you have any new idea to try to get Shelly to dungeon master again. Or more people to dungeon master, because that's always the limiting factor of more and more Dungeons and Dragons sessions happening out there, is that there's only so many people who want to cross that line from being a player into a DM. So what advice would you give, or what kind of things might you want to start inspiring people to do?
So I mean, in terms of becoming a dungeon master per se, some of the tips I really give people is one of the best ones to have is know your audience, know your players. Try to form a group that is formed of people that you'll get along with. If you can. That's not always the choice some people have, but trying to be as comfortable as you can with your players, and sitting down again and kind of explaining to everyone, well, what's your play style? This is my play style. Formulating that early on, so you don't come across that hiccup down the road of someone preferring something over the other. Come up with a play style that you all can agree on. I think that's important, because you want everyone to have fun. You don't want to do too much of one thing. So that, and one of the big tips I give people who want to DM or get into DMing is try not to stress too much about the rules. The DM guide, it's meant to be there for you to go to if you have issues. You don't have to follow the rules word for word. I mean, it's perfectly fine to follow the rules word for word if you want, but my Twitter handle is haphazard DM. That's how I DM. I don't do everything perfectly. So try to go with the flow and let your players know and say, hey, I don't know that rule. I'll make up something off the spot. As long as it's fair and consistent, you try to be consistent with it. If everyone's fine with it, then go with it. And that's one of the big things I think a lot of DMs come across first time, is a player does something and the DM doesn't really know how to respond. Use your imagination. Go with what you think works. And that's, be open.
Ask them to roll a die, even if you don't know what it means when they roll it. Just do it. And then be like, okay.
Just go behind your screen and go, oh, okay. And then act like you're writing down a lot of stuff, but really you're just pooping your pants, because you're and then you this is what you just do. Okay, hang on. Whoa, okay. Hang on. Oh my gosh. Oh, wait, I gotta write that down. Okay. Okay, what did you get again? Okay. Wow. Whoa. Okay.
Nothing happens.
You're done.
You're dead. You're dead. You're dead.
You're dead. Just eliminate the players one by one, and then I won't have to DM anymore.
Yeah, it's fine. Hey, there's nothing wrong with DM. You should definitely give it a try. So you've DM'd before.
Yeah, I didn't have great experiences.
Oh, well, why not? What?
Well, because similar to you seem to think it's cool when people do this. I did not, but you were like, I know A and B, and my players choose Z. That's what threw me, and they just went to the right, and I was like, I don't know what's to the right, and I panicked instead of just being like, oh, okay, whatever I thought on the left can now just be on the right.
Right. So I guess another tip that I could give to new DMs is, if you want to test DMing to see if it's something you want to do, you don't have to use a campaign setting that's already created. Homebrew something. If you can homebrew something, you can make it up on the spot. The players won't know if that's real or not.
I was going to ask if you think it's easier to do homebrew or a published adventure.
I mean, it can go either way. The nice thing about the published is you have the material to go to if you're ever lacking something.
Yeah.
But I feel like with the homebrew, for people that love to be creative, I think it's easier with the homebrew, truthfully, because I can make up whatever. And the players aren't going to know if that's a thing or not. If they say, this kingdom did this, or these people did this, well, I'll say whatever, and they're not going to know.
Right. I do like that kind of freedom. Like, if I just screw up, I'm just going to pretend that's just how things work here.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do it a lot. I do it a lot on the podcast. Sometimes they'll come up with stuff and it it throws me in the spot, and I'll just like, I'm like, oh, well, let's just do this, and they go with it. So, and that's another thing about playing with people that you're comfortable with, because you should never be uncomfortable as a DM. Your players should never make you feel inadequate or make you feel bad about DMing. So
right.
Yeah, and there's the idea that and I feel this too, even when me as a dungeon master, having done it tons of times, where it can feel like it's all on your shoulders, like you are the only one who's carrying the game, and that pressure can sometimes lead to great success, because you're like, oh, I have to come up with something to show that I have I can improvise. But sometimes that pressure can be very the blocker, not letting you want to do it. And I wonder if there's a way to adapt your demo idea or pastime to DMs, and similar to how you had one player who was a DM before in the first session that you DM'd.
Yes.
I wonder if we can be like, oh, here, Shelly, here's all these mostly new players, but one person who can help you out if you need it. To kind of alleviate some of those pressures.
That is a wonderful resource to have when it comes to DMing. When I first started, I had that, like you said, I had the one friend who knew D&D a bit. He never DM'd, but he knew the rules for 3.5. Just having one person in the group, kind of, they don't have to know it all, but if they can help you kind of push you along on parts where you're not sure, that's tremendous help. It's amazing to have someone to back you up when you need it. And that's something with my players. They know I'm not perfect, and I'll even ask the players sometimes if I forget a rule or they don't know the rules and I don't know, I'll be like, what do you guys think is fair? We'll roll with it.
Oh, that's a good approach.
Yeah. So
nice.
Definitely. If you have any friends, like Greg said,
that
has DM'd.
Who has friends nowadays?
I don't know what you mean by that.
But yeah, I'll make myself available too. If anybody wants to do,
if you never
DM demo sessions with me as your player, I'll do it.
Yeah,
she's immediately saying no. She's like, nope.
I think that if I do, if they're going to be new players, and they're probably going to be kids.
Hey, there's nothing wrong
pets.
With that.
Maybe a cat.
There you go. I have 4 dogs, so
well, you have a party right there.
Yeah, exactly. One's a monk, one's a paladin. They'll jump in your game.
There you go.
Dogs playing D&D. It's like perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm going to practice on my kid. First, we're going to build some maps, though, because this looks really cool.
Yeah, definitely. The Incarnate, great resource. And, another fun thing with D&D, too, is everyone likes to see, their characters come to life. And I don't Isundra back here is actually...
I saw that, too.
My girlfriend, Felicia, she's in the podcast. That is her character.
Oh,
so
nice.
Isundra is her character. And, and that's another fun part about the whole D&D, creating your own character aspect, is there's so many artists out there that you can commission to create your characters, make them come to life. And I said we had 4 dogs. The corgi here is actually one of our dogs.
Oh, that's
cute.
awesome.
Yes.
I love that face. I will tell you a story. This was a long time ago, but somebody said that I could, I used to write a column for Dragon Magazine, and a lot of it was about the character I was playing at the time. She was a tiefling wizard. And he said, write me up a description of Tabitha. I'm like, okay. I was so excited to get art created for her. And when she came back, she looked like I had described, except she had enormous boobs. And she was wearing the shirt that was stretching. Oh, no. And I was like, oh, nowhere ever in my description did I say
right.
that Tabitha was super endowed, and she would never wear that, even if she was. She would have a big
there'd be balance
robe
issues.
on. She would never wear this. And it was too late. They were just saying, here's your character. I'm like, what a stupid liberty to take on somebody's character. But that was just I think it was an assumption, well, these are fantasy women, so they must have washboard abs and gigantic boobs. I'm like,
I think that was
No,
of an
that's not
era
cool.
because
it was definitely of an era. It was a long time ago.
there has been a lot of shift of that with the 5th edition art direction, which I was super happy
This
about.
was way before that. Way before.
Oh.
Yep.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
I mean, it was still cool to see like her
Yeah.
come to life, and she still looked badass. But it was just like, whoa. I would never have described her like that.
Right.
Now we need a new Tabitha art description out there, and
We need like a quarantine Tabitha where she's just like in sweats. She's like 15 extra pounds.
she's got a 30 ounce of wine that she's like
I was
drinking.
gonna say, that or a
mask.
coffee mug.
a unibrow and a mask, maybe some maskne where like she sweats under her mask and her face breaks out.
That sounds like everyone's fantasy character to play with.
Now.
There you go. So
There
is
you
that,
go.
is that does she have like a CR of 15? Don't mess with her.
Awesome.
Maybe a little too much reality in my fantasy. I don't know.
People, it's escapism, as we said. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this fun conversation, Ryan. I'm definitely interested in all of the fun stuff that you've been saying with your podcast, as well as this board game. I
Yes.
want to try out. Hopefully, one day we'll be able to make it back to Columbus and play this board game.
Well, thank you.
I'd love to.
I appreciate you guys having me on the show, Greg, Shelly. You guys are awesome. Thank you
You're
so
awesome.
much.
Awesome. What's the best way? You mentioned your Twitter handle, but say it again, and then how people can get to find out about your podcast.
Yeah. So in terms of myself, you could find me on Twitter at haphazarddm. But probably the best place to get info on us is our website at www.tavernscaverns.com. And we also have a Twitter and Instagram handle, the Taverns and Caverns, on Instagram, and then Twitter's just Taverns Caverns.
Shout out for the www in that address.
Yes.
I love that.
Awesome. Thanks so
Oh,
much,
this is
Ryan.
great. This has been so fun.
Thank you, guys. You guys are wonderful.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. It was an honor.
See you later.
Aw.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.